All right, all right. This is Real Estate Radio, our Get to Know. We're going to try again, Mr. Ohan. So we're trying to do this iBuyer thing, and God rest his soul, Ken Jenny, over a month and a half now, we're going to do a show with Ken talking about the iBuyer world. And I shared a little bit of Ken's plight on the iBuyer world, and more importantly, how we need to kind of embrace it and understand it more than anything else is kind of understand it. So, Ohan, as you know, we start with music, but I already know a little bit about, and I thought I knew. So Ohan has this little bit of a rap history, certainly the jazz history, but today you're listening to a new artist and you can't pronounce her name.
I can't even pronounce her name. Like, this is the beauty of like Spotify and the different apps we have. They recommend different things, and then you just pick them up and run with it. And I usually, like, in general, I do like jazz. That's the genre I kind of gravitate towards. But there's this artist, I can't even pronounce her name, French name. I think it's Kaye Amy. She's a little bit of jazz, a little bit of folk music, and hopefully when this pandemic is behind us, maybe I see her in concert in Paris or something. Who knows, right?
Gotta go to the home country. You can't. I bet she travels to see us.
Yeah, well, it depends. Maybe we'll send her a ticket.
Yeah. So you mentioned, of course, with the love of your life, and I think that with Emily, we talked about liking country. No, not really. She's a rock and roller. So we talked about kind of the 80s, 70s, the Rolling Stones world. But here's the deal. So you and Emily go to a deserted island. Mm-hmm. What one cassette, CD, MP3, whatever you want to call it, what are you bringing? 8-track?
Yeah. Wow, 8-track. Probably, like, if I can pack my record player, I would pack my record player and take Tony Bennett, Lady Gaga. That's what I would do.
Tony Bennett. Well, that's two.
Well, no, they did a concert. It's Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga. They have an album that they did together. That's the album I would take with us.
I did not know that. And in a way, I'm glad I didn't. No kidding.
Oh, no. Trust me. Give it a shot. You'll be surprised.
That's a very kind of interesting combination.
Very. It was hands down my favorite concert I ever went to at the Hollywood Bowl. If you've never been, if anybody who's watching this never been, it's a one in a lifetime experience. You got to go to Hollywood Bowl and see a concert. And I was lucky enough that Emily bought me those as a Christmas gift. And we were there pretty close to the stage when Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett did their thing together.
That is really cool. I wasn't a Lady Gaga fan in the beginning, but I just got to respect that lady. Unbelievable talent.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe it's just because she was a little different. But of course, we know the host sitting here in this chair is very different. Hold on, I did some research. So we're talking about the iBuyer world, and I had 3 questions. And it's interesting because they're not really questions. It's like, worry today, ? Worry tomorrow, ? Or just do business as usual. And I think it probably, anyone watching this, like you say, could be fit into different buckets. But then I went online, I looked. Of course, we know Zillow. Of course, we know Redfin for the iBuyer world. But here we go. OfferPad, Open Door, Easy Knock, Orchard, Ideal Agent, Rex, Upnest, Home Lister, Express Offers, Home Light, Real Sure, and of course, Compass. I mean, there's a plethora of these. It's kind of like when you and I started and the internet was creeping in. I remember when we first tried to do this episode, you talked about that real small percentage of transactions that were on the internet. And now kind of equate it to today, where we have a very small percentage going through the iBuyer world. So maybe you can shed a little light, because when we talked about our entrance was Realtor.com, I knew nothing, but you were a practicing agent, so you kind of understood the business more than I did. But we were fed fire hose understanding the industry. But we realized that there was 2 schools of thought with the internet. Oh, this internet thing, it's not going to be anything big, John, really? Or, oh my God, right? There's kind of 2 schools of thought is how I recall. So I kind of equate that in a way to the iBuyer entrance of today.
Well, one funny note before we dive into the more serious stuff. One of my fondest memories is how frustrated I was once on the main line of suburbs of Philadelphia with a few agents that had very similar reaction to what you just did right now, impersonated John. And John had to come in after me and clean up how, like, I left that office so frustrated that the office manager had to call John, and John had to come in and like smooth things out because I was just so frustrated. But it was frustrating, and I sense similar frustration with technologists and let's call them evolutionaries in the industry, right? That they're focused on the future, not the present or the past. Frustration with the reaction, right? It's very similar. Like how can you be so dismissive of this thing, without fully understanding what consumers are looking for and understanding that need and adopting to it if it fits your priorities, where you are in your cycle of business and personal goals, right? That's what we need to focus on. I think with iBuyers, it's or anything new to that end. That list of that's a very long, and there's a few there too, a few more off that list, by the way, John. And I, again, like I find it very intriguing because it solves for the consumer need. That standardized way of buying and selling real estate is no longer sustainable to certain groups of consumers. It's just not, to certain groups. They've been wanting to find different ways to solve for, I want to sell my home, but I don't want to get out of my home until I find another home, but I want to sell my home to have enough funds that I can make an attractive offer on the next home. That's a real problem that exists all the time. And the iBuyer solves for that, for example. Now, does every consumer have that as a priority? No, but there's a good chunk that does. And that's just one example, right? So I think iBuyer solves for a real problem. It's a small percentage today of transactions. I believe it will grow. How big? Potentially pretty big if it continues to solve for all of the additional consumer problems. That's really at the heart of it. If they continue to solve for it, it will grow bigger. And as far as like how you started this, kind of the research you're doing, like, is it today? Should I worry about it today, tomorrow, or never? It's not about worry. Should I adopt to it now or not adopt to it at all? Or should I wait for it later? It depends on where you are and who you are in the industry. From an agent perspective, if you're an agent that kind of you're reaching that maturity in your career, by the time it becomes a significant portion of the transactions, you may not have to worry about it, right? But if you're a newbie coming into the industry, kind of just gaining your tracks, getting your legs underneath you as an agent, you should definitely pay attention to this and have it as part of your value proposition to consumers, right? It has to be there. And third, you're in the middle of the road. It's a matter of calibrating proportionately your business to see what portion of your existing kind of past customers, the prospects that you need to stay in touch with, can potentially have a need that can be solved with iBuyers, right? Or the iBuyer model. That's how you need to look at it.
I think that's actually really interesting from my perspective, and all the flip it shows that we have all over the place. And that actually connects to my good friend, Julie Vanderblue, who's actually taken that on really pretty heavily. So we're going to do another episode once Ohan can talk more about RealtyTrack, because kind of a little bit of the foundation of this call is Mr. Ken Jenny. And Ken was in the kind of the beginning stages of RealtyTrack. What year would that be? Probably late 90s somewhere, right?
Early 2000s, I would say, yeah.
Early 2000s. So going through a bunch of stuff at RealtyTrack, we're looking forward to that episode so you can share more about what because the investment world in real estate, I think, has been propelled a bit by these shows, and making folks think about, maybe I can do that. And so Julie really took that to heart, and she said, I can do this. And so she has these shows that she does with her husband that are just, they look so darn professional, because with these little devices, we can look really professional on video. Yeah, and I touched that only because I think it'll be great when we can have that perception from someone working in the field, someone that's working on the vendor side in that field, to kind of chat about what's going on with investment properties. So I think that's a big part of this. Maybe that's where you mentioned, there's a certain group where they're at in their career, how much it's going to affect them. But it's also maybe how much that type of agent does research before they go on a call with a new listing for a new listing. How much do they prepare? And those are the folks that might be spending more time looking into this plethora of companies and trying to figure out, well, where's my place in this? I think the big place is for you as an agent to understand it enough to be able to communicate that to your prospect, your consumer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. Quick note on the investor side of it. I am obviously very excited and intrigued by that. With that sector within our industry, there's huge opportunities. I'll make this statement that anything that already gained the spotlight in any industry is yesterday's news, and it's present today, and it's going to continue. But things that are not necessarily in the news yet are the ones that the startups, a couple of guys or girls, in the Bay Area or Kansas City or Denver, Austin, like they're sitting there thinking about it and working on. I think that investor space, being able to invest in real estate, is at that stage, by the way, of that. It's not quite front and center in the news yet. But there's a big chunk, a big need emerging, and it always starts with consumer behavior. I know I'm sounding like a broken track here, and not only in our industry, John. Like you and I talked about this before. Like you have to understand consumer behavior outside of real estate and how that behavior, everything else that they're consuming, buying, interacting with, affects their culture, their culture and expectations, which then translates to real estate as well. I don't know if we do a good job. We get very myopic and we put blinders on and stay within this industry. I think strategic thinking requires us to open that up and understand consumers as a whole as they do business with every other industry as well.
And because you know where I'm going to go, because this is exactly what Ken already is always about the consumer, whether it was where he pissed off the MLS at one point, where he pissed off a broker, it was always about the consumer and really protecting and thinking about the consumer. And his comment about the CMA is a little heavy, but he says, we fight every day to keep the infamous CMA at the forefront of the consumer's understanding of value, when all they really want is an instant, not a 3-hour dissertation of how great we are as agents, but an instant, simple estimate of the property's value. And then he speaks to as well, come on, folks, isn't it time to move the industry forward? Or the question I have is, are we simply going to fight everything that moves our transactional processes into the current millennium? It's all about the consumer. And he says, for those who resist change, no worries, change will happen without you.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing with Realtor.com, right? We were saying kind of that. I was saying it very nicely. I wasn't being like, you better do this. Oh, I might have been doing that. That's why I got called into that office.
I was a little bit more Philly, always been a little bit more Philly, a little bit more rocky. You're smooth. You're
so yeah,
but I was frustrated. I mean, again, last time we talked, you didn't remember the exact slide. I can remember it like today. It was a slide that had a bar graph on it, and it had the different places where consumers went to find homes for sale. Internet was 3.5%, 3.5%, and we had that. And then second slide was this chart that showed potential growth, and we were like, ooh, 10%, ooh, that's going to be huge, right? Fast forward 20 years, where are we now? Who looks anywhere but the internet, for homes for sale, right? So change. What was it the other day? Somebody reminded me of something I said at one point. It could have been Scotch induced, but nonetheless, apparently, like I said this, like change is unnoticeable, right? Which is very true. Like as change occurs, we're in the middle of it. We don't recognize that it's occurring. Then at some point we look back, we're like, whoa.
It's more looking back on it.
It happened, right? It actually took place. With iBuyer and a lot of changes, I really like, it's not like the past where we used to say the industry's changing and every hallway had that conversation going on. Yet the second year you went there, it was really the same. But I feel like in the last 5 years, especially, things really changed in our industry. And I feel that that's the foundation that's going to push a lot of things to the brink for brokers, MLSs, agents, vendors, everybody in our industry.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time because I knew nothing about real estate coming in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I learned very quickly two things. One, that this is a mess. And the disconnect between the association, the MLS, and the brokers was just really weird. I think you guys should all be on the same team. So again, outside looking in the beginning, but now as I look back and reflect, I'm like, not much has changed.
Yeah.
And the fight with technology from the agent standpoint, still protecting databases and worried about loading my database and they're going to steal all my stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, and we also joked about the fact that we were saying, don't forget to check your email every day. And now we're trying to find ways to say, hey, you should time block. Don't check your email every second of the day, time block.
But it's amazing, isn't it? Amazing. I remember that too. Like we used to like literally tell them, hey, you need to check your email daily because there could be leads there you need to follow up on. Can you imagine? Like, dude, I feel old just even saying that anymore.
I know, but folks watching this may feel old too, but they're realizing, you know what? I still haven't changed my AOL. I still have AOL. There's plenty of those folks too. And it's resistance to change, but it's also sometimes if the leadership leading these independent contractors get it and really try to play in the sandbox with their agents, I think that propels training so much better than just saying, here's your training person, they're going to do everything for you. But if everyone's really on, a big word for me is adoption. And we always struggle with that. When you sell a broker 100 realtor.com sites and making sure that at least 30-40% of them use it and get benefits from it. CRM, best example of adoption issues. But I think when you have a GM, a CEO, a CTO, a CMO, and they're all, you ask them the question, so what is the benefit of product A? My guess is they're all going to have different answers depending on their P&L, depending on their initiatives within their department, and maybe not even getting it to begin with. So I think no matter what, adoption is always going to be the kind of the key to anything that we talk about. But when the internet came in, the fear or the excitement, the iBuyer coming in, the fear is pretty much mostly fear, I think, from the agent standpoint. They're not thinking about how this can benefit me, where in fact, most likely, at least maybe half of those companies will find a way to help the agent find the benefit.
Yeah, and that's, I know we're focusing on iBuyer, but you're touching on something like the whole 1099 versus kind of the brokers kind of wanting. I mean, you and I have had many meetings with brokerages and over the history, like from East Coast to the West Coast, and they're all, well, we want to control the brand. We want to market ourselves that we are kind of the value. Well, those words didn't match the actions because at the end they fell flat in the face of not being able to control a 1099 versus an employee. Yet to go in the employee direction, it was a very major shift in a P&L model, in an operational expense model for a broker that they didn't want to go there either. So in a way, I feel like over the years, brokers always wanted the best of both worlds, but not pay for it, but no, money or time, right? And that's a challenge that in many ways it's coming back full circle, right? And I mean, you have companies like Compass and others emerging. Obviously, Redfin's been around for a while trying to do this, and solving for that. I think brokers didn't focus on solving on that, and I'm hoping that with these emerging models, it puts enough pressure that brokerages do pay attention and do start thinking about investing more strategically and less tactically to what's happening in the next year to us, as opposed to where do we want to be 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everyone focuses on Zillow and this estimate. Everyone blames Zillow, and that's a big thing where it comes to me from a lack of understanding or really doing the research, like I've started to do, months ago when I was talking with Kenny. But I think it's coming to the forefront to the point where I see a lot of panic buttons being pushed. Yeah. And I'm not saying when the Alan Tates of the world, the Abby Hallidays of the world, or the Realty USA, my buddy Merle Whitehead, when these folks finally give in's too strong a term, but when they finally sell their brokerage, to me, that was the beginning of this next phase we're going into, where brokers buying enterprise CRMs or these big deals, their margin is beyond slim. It's like negative numbers. So I think that's just a very realistic concern for them. And you and I kind of came in towards the end of that, where they've already been starting to get nickel and dimed on enterprise, big company-wide solutions. And so now they're at a point where I can see why these large brokers are finally selling their company.
Yeah, well, because the two,
they're holding on to it.
Because the two big traditional kind of names, obviously, well, actually I would add a couple more to it, but the names that are like scaling through acquisition, I would say more than the others, would be obviously Realogy Brands and Home Services, right? And because they're, through scale, they, when your margins are thin, through scale, you can still recognize growth and you consolidate, right?
Sure.
It's very obvious to me, like it makes sense. Whereas like, Keller Williams is heading in the opposite direction, saying, no, like we're not necessarily going to go through acquisition. We're going to invest in technology. We want to combine kind of that strength we have in being agent oriented kind of culture. We're going to combine that with technology, almost like a hybrid of, to me, it was like similar to Compass, like what Compass came about. I was like, wait, like I think Keller Williams had an opportunity if they would have jumped on this a little bit faster, right? That was always like my thought, because there were always agent-oriented, agent-centric models, but the technology wasn't quite there, like front and center, like Compass did, right?
Right.
It's interesting. And obviously you have Remax, so I don't want to leave them out. I remember Remax is probably, we always said it, like one of the most mature, established agents always were at Remax. You and I loved going to Remax shows because we talked to real professionals who've been in the business. They know how to manage their business and they viewed it as a business, right? I think they have an opportunity in doubling down and kind of on that fact, going back to those roots and saying, yeah, like we don't want to be the biggest, but we want to be the ones that attract the top agents and specialize in niche areas of doing it through the agents and specialized markets. Not that they're looking for my advice, right? But like that, I feel like those are opportunities exist in the industry. And I really hope, and I know like there's so many smart people, like Bailey's at Remax now and others, like there's so many smart people now within these big brands, big companies, that I feel like there's conversations going on in conference rooms and on Zooms about strategic positioning and strategic planning. And again, my optimism is that there's commitment to it. It's not just talk, right? There's commitment to it, follow through, because man, I love the people. Like there's so much goodness in the industry and these businesses, and I want to see them succeed in the next evolution of our industry, right?
And I agree with you. I don't know where the bug came from, and I became addicted to wanting to help agents. I just have always felt really comfortable doing that. Well, maybe because there's such a huge need, and I'm not talking about just the basic adoption issues. I'm just talking about helping them understand what's going on around them, but at the same time, making sure we can help them push away some of that noise. Because I feel strongly what you said before. If you're, 55 to 65 years old and you have another 10, 15 years you're going to do this business, most likely it's not going to affect you severely. Mm-hmm. But where you might have that effect is if you don't have the understanding of it. When the consumer asks an agent about it, they don't have to be a professor, but they got to have a B+.
Yeah.
At least that's my thought. I don't want to be an expert on it, but hey, Sally and Joe Consumer, here's what I think about the iBuyer, and this is what my perception is, and this is how it might help you or it might hurt you. And to have at least some bullets in their head of how to have that conversation, I think that's pretty important.
Absolutely. And and I know we didn't talk about MLSs. I feel like we got to at least address that piece of it too, as it relates to iBuyer. I think like they're the least, I'd say impacted, right? Influenced by the whole iBuyer process, because they have an opportunity to continue serve as the marketplace in the industry And I feel like they're going to be the least impacted by at least this. There's other factors that are definitely MLSs need to obviously consider, and they do. They're in that direction, but this particular one, no. And that's another area. I'm really like there's so many people in the MLS that I care for, and I want to see them truly like stop the talking and do the doing of kind of evolving beyond just kind of the police of the industry, or evolving beyond just a database in the industry. There's an opportunity to double down on being a marketplace. The biggest hindrance in the past for all of us in the industry, like all of the players, is that we were closed, right? Because the marketplace, MLS, was closed to agents. Like, I see what inventory is there, I see what the offers of compensation is, and agents representing consumers have this visibility, but the consumer doesn't, right? That's changing too. Redfin is publishing buyers' commissions, right? And now, that's starting to kind of bleed out, so that offers of compensation is no longer in this closed marketplace too. Now it's just starting to bleed out, that full visibility to consumer participation in the marketplace is again front and center. And I think that part of it is, I want to say, a threat. It's an evolution that MLSs need to pay attention to, on what role do they continue playing. If consumer is the focus, this transparency, all of this visibility is out there, what role do they continue playing effectively in the industry, and how? How do you service the agents that's changing, right? How do you service brokerages that are changing? Zillow is a brokerage. How do you continue servicing a brokerage that can potentially, by the way, be your competitor too, because they have the entire data and so these are big topics, and there's a lot of smart people in the industry debating it in conference rooms and discussing it. But I'll kind of loop it right back to where I know you like to always loop it back to. The very first molecule of the industry is the agent, because that's the frontline transaction, right? Consumers and the agent in the middle of that transaction, it really boils back down to that, starting there and expand the ring beyond that, and just view the industry holistically.
Yeah, and what you said before about policing, is that was the overall perception of what the MLS did, holding on to policies and controlling the data. So I think there has to be a way for the Association of Realtors and the MLS to be more hand in hand. I'm not saying that they're not. But the consumer doesn't care, doesn't even know. As vendors, we really get into some of that minutia and really start to, why are they not working together? Why are they not? At the end,
well, I would isolate. Sorry, John, to interrupt, but I would isolate the Association of Realtors. I have great respect to Bob Goldberg and what he's doing there, and especially on the social front. Those are not easy topics to take on, and they are. That's leadership, because you do the easy stuff. That's just, everybody can do the easy stuff, right? But their role, like, I see associations as an advocacy, centric models. I isolate MLS from associations. Associations are there to advocate for real estate and lobby on our behalf, and influence this overall theme of the industry, which I don't want to sound like I'm advertising for Bob Goldberg and NAR, but I feel like they're doing a great job, especially in recent.
Yeah, no, and some folks that have come there along the way. We were, and that's what we did. We were the Association of Realtors frontline vendor, and we could do that. What if, and oh my gosh, if we had just done this, if there was better control, if there was, and not smarter people, and no one really understood what was going to happen. But if there was a way to go back to 1995 and really repackage the internet for real estate, I'm sure 99 out of 100 would sign up today, because it wasn't embraced. But like I said, no one really knew how crazy and big this thing would get. And to equate that to the iBuyer, is that going to be as big as the internet changed the business back in early 2000s?
Yeah.
Well, who's to say and who's to know? But I think it's a fair guess,
Yeah.
since the evolution of this darn internet has done what it did in 20 plus years compared to what this iBuyer is going to do in less than 2. So those stats we talked about, 3.5%, and that number now, you had that on the last call. What is the iBuyer number right now of transactions? Do you know the percentage?
0.5%.
I think it's like, yeah, right. So the next step will be 1%. Then we'll get to 2.5%. Will there be a day where it's 10%? My guess is by 2050, who knows what it'll be, but it's going to keep evolving, which overall typically is good.
Yeah. In 2050, hopefully you and I are sitting on a porch somewhere in like rocking chairs with a book next to us and a cup of coffee, like talking about nature and not real estate.
Yeah, I hope so too, but it's weird that I struggle with that, thinking, will I ever stop trying to help agents in the world? I don't think so. So it might be 75, 80 going, real casual and a little bit slower, but it'll be the same thing. Do it.
Yeah.
Call you people. Let them know what you do. Yeah. And by the way, if you're not an A personality, I think that's where people do struggle in the business, where you're not able to pick up the phone and call anyone. You're not able to run out to community events and be gregarious and try to get folks to like you and have fun.
Yeah, I agree.
And so,
well, John, you're a nice guy. Like you know, your reputation in the industry and everybody just is willing to pick up your call. It's because it's very obvious, like that authenticity and the fact that you actually do care shines through every time. And that's why, like, from all the years working with you, I know everybody's willing to just talk to you because they know you're just coming from a good place. And we need more people like you in the industry, John.
Yes, Ohan, that's very nice of you to say, and the check's in the mail. No, and
cool.
And this whole thing that I've been doing, a lot of it was supported by Ken Jenny, saying you can't stop. If you know, don't worry about the reactions, don't worry about the views, just do it, and do it as John. And so I guess that can be a good thing most of the time. But my wife does say, a little TMI. You might want to slow down.
I think being you is always good. I have a saying that we're all paid actors. Like next conference you go to, I think you heard me say this. You're a paid actor because you don't dress like that at home. You don't talk like that at home, right? And so when you put on like the uniform and you go, like, all of a sudden you take on, most just take on this persona and that this is work. But reality is, authenticity is a word that gets tossed around, and there's so many books and articles about it, leadership, this, that. Reality is, it's very simple. Just don't pretend to be somebody else when you're working versus at home. Be who you are everywhere, all the time. That's all. And if some people don't like it, too bad. Just don't change for them. Just be who you are.
Yeah, if that's something I got from you, Ohan, that would be it. Just be who you are, because you are who you are. Managing you, that was such a joke.
Yeah.
Funny. So the early days of Realtor.com, for folks that don't know, I was actually Ohan's boss for like a year, I think. We're going to tag
or less. I mean,
I want to tag Matt Woolley on this just because. But yeah, I stole you from Matt's team, however that worked out. But
I was traded.
Huh?
I was traded.
Yeah, it was a free agency deal.
Yeah.
Now, man, I can tell you that when I did that, I don't remember that office in Philly you're talking about.
On the main line, the Bryn Mawr office of Fox and Roach. I remember like it's yesterday.
Well, so again, but for folks that know you, that love-hate thing, I don't like that. We've talked about that before. Some people loved Ken Jenny. Some people hated Ken. Well, no, I don't think they really hated him. Maybe not. They didn't like his opinion or didn't like what he was saying, but just be careful with that hate word, people. That's what kind of my bottom line. But you're a gem, man. You're a smart guy. You make me laugh. Very similar in a way to what I get from Kenny. So now these conferences are going to have that tremendous void. And I know there's so many people that feel that way about Ken. Like when you go to these conferences, you know you're going to get a giggle, you're going to get a little info you didn't know, and you're going to get a spin on things that you didn't think of. Yeah. And Oman, think about that about yourself.
Yeah. Well, I don't, because Ken Jenny, the things that that's just one name of many people who've done so many things in the industry. Like there's no way. I don't even come close to comparing to those guys. Like no way.
It's different though. It's different because you talked about this with me a while ago. We're talking about all those folks that we looked up to for information, and the folks that are now going to be looking to you, or maybe, hopefully not, but to me. I'm coming in, John. I'm 23 years old. I'm just starting as a vendor in real estate. Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah.
Oh, do you really want to know? No, I'm kidding. But no, to be fair,
don't do it.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what happens, though.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's going to be, my little MO is it'll all work out. Mm-hmm. Now, some days you say, it'll all work out. Some days you say, it'll all work out.
Yeah.
But it'll all work out one way or another. I think if agents stay steadfast to their sphere of influence and make sure they communicate and make sure they at least get a basic understanding of the iBuyer world so they can have the conversation at least. I think, again, for the next X amount of years, no one's going to be hugely affected by this. But I think it's the awareness and keeping your eyes on it.
Agreed.
So we did the bucket list. I think we should just end with this because I know that we were going to spend too much time talking about Ken, but I'm going to give him a quick cheers.
I'll use coffee.
By the way, for anyone watching, everyone knows this is not wine. Mr. Ken Jenny, a tribute.
Cheers.
Good day.